but they apply it with their own model. It's a field and it works. You can see in biotech development, now that we have the obese patients or pre-patient in the mix, what do I do in this metabolic environment? I see people talking about insulin resistance and how it links to CNS. I think now it's a cornerstone, which to me is very interesting because we're going to start talking about maybe not prevention, but trying to look at diseases decades before they actually get really bad. Radiopharmaceuticals, honestly, it's so complex on a supply chain standpoint.
And because you need to ship it's within hours to treat the patient.
It's understanding on a geographic standpoint, how does that work and the capacities. And then you still have all the medical things, right? The segmentations of patients, the traditional things are still there, but you also have the supply. This seems to work. The second one is probably that we have no benchmarks. But if you take every piece that is within Alira, you have a benchmark, you have a competitor, you have a market, and so on. As a CRO, I can tell you that we are working exclusively with biotechs. That's very clear. But it's true that when you zoom out and do corporate-wise, not having benchmarks is very uncomfortable.
Bienvenue to a new episode. I'm your host Philip, and on this show, I'm interviewing the best Europeans in biotech to help you grow. Following the most important biotech trends can be challenging. One of the best at this is Joris Pezzini from Alira Health. He's following the industry very closely and is seeing a lot through working with many different biotechs as clients. So I went to Barcelona to catch up with him. I've known him for several years and it was good to catch up. We talked about the hottest trends in biotech today, such as obesity, I&I, ADCs, radiopharmaceuticals. We also talked about the challenges behind the fast growth of Alira and how to bridge biotech and a healthy lifestyle. So here's my conversation with Joris, and please hit the like, follow button if you're enjoying it. So, welcome to the show, Joris.
Thank you. Thank you for welcoming me.
Amazing. And
Barcelona, yeah, with sun. So you were like,
we need the AC, but that's good.
Yeah.
Cool. I mean, I want to start with industry trends, basically. I mean, you are seeing so much through Alira, through your clients. And the first one we can discuss is the shift in therapeutic areas, especially in biotech, especially the rise of metabolic approaches. So I'm just curious here, what have you seen recently?
Yeah, it's like a trend, a show, and every year as is on campaign, it changes all the time. So it's difficult to follow. And especially when, of course, it takes 10 to 15 years to develop something, it's very, very frustrating because, depending on what year it is, it's difficult. But it's true that it used to be full oncology, very precision medicine, and now it's full, yeah, exactly. And it became something very different with metabolic and so on. So I think, of course, it's difficult to navigate. At the same time, I would say that there is a lot of trending kind of communication. Doesn't mean that the rest doesn't get finance or progress. So I think, we in the ecosystem still see everything being developed. It's just that the way you approach the different things are just changing. So.
Yeah. That's good. I was just in Copenhagen and recording with Christoph Wono from the Biopharma.
Yeah.
And we talked about I&I, which I think is another really hot one with metabolic. And he was saying, yeah, kind of everyone was labeling themselves IO. Now it's all I&I.
Change the word.
Did you see that as well?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we spend a lot of time actually on the narratives of equity story and those kind of things. Even, cell therapies sometimes. So you have companies that are borderline cell therapy or something else, depending on the actual technology. And sometimes they remove cell therapy, or I've had a client in the last few weeks that also remove plant-based kind of thing. So it's really something where I think you want to make sure, because in the end, people are going to know, right? They're going to know whether it's cell therapy, it's a plant or whatever. But I think because the attention span is very, very low, I think you want to make sure that your first words just allow VCs, if you're trying to raise money, kind of have enough interest so that you can get to the actual really important stuff. So it's a narrative and it's marketing in the end, right?
And storytelling. I mean, biotech is about telling a story. You don't sell any products, but you sell,
So in years you sell a story. That's true.
That's good. And on the actually on metabolic, one thing that struck me recently was the deal of Zealand and Pharma and Roche, which was just massive. I think I've rarely seen such a big deal in in European biotech almost. I mean, I think what was it, 1.7, 1.8 upfront?
Yeah, upfront, yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, crazy. At the same time, for a group like Roche to enter, I mean, they had a few things, but to really enter and make a big move, it's small money. I mean, if you look at the number of the investments they all have, all the big pharma in R&D is still very strong. So between I think 25 and 30% of their revenues. I mean, it's still a very innovative industry, I would say. And metabolic being important and also potentially high revenues, I think you could have a business case for that transaction. But metabolic is an interesting one for me. I like it a lot first personally because I think that's maybe a very big challenge for pharma, because pharma used to be and still is to some extent the very sick patient, very fancy drug that like the ADC, the monoclonal antibody that would go again in a very sick patients, life threatening and so on. And in a way, you're kind of moving upstream to not yet prevention, but like obese patient, diabetes for sure, and then obese patient. And obese, in a way, is a pre-patient. It's not even a patient sometimes. So, like, you have pre-patient concepts getting into the mix. And you could even say next time is going to be prevention. Now, the question is for pharma, how do you get towards prevention? Because there is no business model. But it's always funny when I talk to somebody in the biotech ecosystem. Like, you have two ways of handling the discussion. I think one is, what are you doing as a job? And he talks to you about about what I invest in, kind of the things I develop, and it's very technical. And so, how do you take care of your health at home? Very different thing. And at some point, I think we will have the job to make those things, transversally connected. Which again is difficult because there is no business model behind, but I think it's very interesting.
It's interesting, yeah. I mean, obesity is an interesting thing because pharma is going earlier in the condition, but it's still a similar approach in terms of drug development, and the revenues is huge. Or at least the unmet medical need, if you wish, or the struggle to like lose weight is actually very real.
Yeah.
So it's funny.
So they applied with their own model for now. For now it works. It's a field and it works. But to me, and you can see in biotech development is now okay. Now that we have the obese patients or pre-patient in the mix, what do I do in this metabolic environment? Now I see people talking about insulin resistance and how it links to CNS and to all. So I think now it's a cornerstone, which to me is very interesting because again, we're gonna start talking about maybe not prevention, but trying to look at diseases decades before they actually get really bad, which to me is a very, very interesting development.
It's a good one, yeah. Yeah, I remember I was Navid from Novo Holdings.
Yeah.
But he's part of the Novo group. We discussed it with Novo because that's the only thing that puzzles me a bit on Novo. Like, I mean, they're making just so much money out of diabetes is a bit, is also kind of environmental disease for 90+%, and obesity as well. And just society kind of encourages or doesn't like put a huge like discount towards, or at least a huge bonus towards prevention. And they're just making so much profit. But actually what was interesting is that they work quite a lot on at least they work on prevention as well. At least 1% of their revenues annual is only going towards prevention and profit. So they're actually trying to do something as well. Could they do more? I don't know. But
I don't know. I think it's first of all, you have to respect in a way those who found a way to still help patients who don't have the education and so on, because it's very easy to say, okay, let's do prevention.
Yeah.
When you have access to, money, when you have access to education, to know a little bit, understand nutrition, sleep, whatever. So I think, yes, it sounds easy to fix a health lifestyle. At the same time, it's super, super complex. So I think it's good that we actually can address all types of patients, and maybe a drug will be better for some, or starting the cycle, because I think also it is especially true for obese patients, where you need to have a positive cycle before you want to take care of your lifestyle, right? And those drugs potentially are very useful in that first step. So I think, to me, I see that as a positive evolution for humanity, if I can say it this way. But then, of course, it's a question of how you make the business model more, what's the word, transversal, comprehensive, holistic, because in the end, everything, again, I would have a pill or something that would treat nutrition, sleep, and training are I think you could prevent 70% of diseases. That's a huge bar.
So sure, yeah. No, it's a good. I mean, yeah, I think I would agree as well. That overall it's positive, but I'm just even thinking, even myself, I think the impact of biotech is huge in like life-threatening disease where there's really no other option.
Yeah.
Versus, I think for obesity, there's a few other options. So maybe the threshold, the impact is a bit lower, but I mean, seems like patients need it already to pay also. So yeah, it's,
Yeah, and then you have. I think we're also getting into the segmentation of obese patients, and those for who really those drugs are, and they have a pretty good safety profile as well. So I think you can probably use them without a lot of issues, at least it seems. And then when you sub-segment the population, then you get into really interesting things.
regularly, and yeah, and when you go off the drug,
Yeah,
the
just the effect disappears. But then this is where it's interesting because you go off the drug and maybe you can replace that by a lifestyle change. I think again that's positive cycle is what we all need in a way.
Yeah, it's good. And you were mentioning, and when we prepared this discussion as well, like medicine 3.0, which I
Yeah,
had never really heard about this term, but like really the blurring the line between lifestyle changes or environmental changes and drug. Can you,
yeah. Bidem invented. I think it's Peter Attia.
okay, he was there.
Yeah, with this famous book, he's talking about medicine 3.0. Again, interesting in the sense that I don't want to summarize it by just prevention, but indeed just trying to anticipate whatever conditions you're going to have, 10, 20, 30 years down the road. And then when you have that concept and you use that as a framework, then all conditions are super interesting because, diabetes, obesity for sure, all the metabolically related issues, CNS, and now we get into Alzheimer and Parkinson could also be those things. So, of course, it's very powerful, but what I like about it is that it also very difficult. Sounds simple, but very difficult to implement. And so, in a way, it's challenging the traditional pharma model. And not only pharma, it's pharma also healthcare and all the physicians and hospitals and so on. And that's why I think one of the types of clients we have on our side at Alira also has changed for that because now you see some nutrition company knocking out our doors and saying, oh, how can we play a role there? Even now the tech companies, I want to say, oh, but those people are actually at home. So you need to understand their lifestyle at home and you need to treat them, manage them in a way before they become pre-patient, therefore, many years before. So I think that's where it's pushing pharma to reinvent themselves. Whether it's going to be pharma doing it alone, I don't know. But at least it's pushing the ecosystem in an interesting direction.
And I'm curious to hear how you apply it personally, but we can go into,
If we have enough time, because I love it.
because I'm quite fan of this topic as well. But,
Still meditate?
I do still meditate every day. Yeah,
Same.
and yeah, let's continue on the traits and about the when we touched I&I and metabolic. One thing also that I think comes a lot these days is ADCs and radiotherapeutics. And I've seen Novartis, I think, got a big approval for radiotherapeutics recently. What did you see there? I think
So it's complex. So that's why we love it. Because when you try to help companies, or when it's complex, of course, I think we can play a role. So we are experts, or we've really worked a lot in both radiopharmaceuticals and ADCs. And then I can add cell therapy, gene therapy, and all those kind of things. We love it because again, it's difficult to bring to market. Every single of those innovation and modalities have their own issues. Cell therapy is probably still the scalability. Gene therapy is probably the commercial model with the Pfizer and Bluebird Bio recent example is kind of scary. ADCs, to me, was talking to a former Mablink executive recently and talking about ADCs and so on. And indeed, I think a lot of generations, I think, every generation really are progressing on the linkers, on the way to build those molecules. Still, in the end, it's the traditional approach. You need to not only have a fantastic molecule, you need to demonstrate that into the clinic. And I think that's what we're waiting for in the lab for the latest generations of ADCs. radiopharmaceuticals, honestly, it's so complex on a supply chain standpoint. We have our people here were just, experts of that, and you're like, oh my god, when you present that to a counter ship, it was hours to treat the patient. It's that, it's understanding on a geographic standpoint, how does that work, and the capacities, and then you still have all the medical things, right? The segmentations of patients, the traditional things are still there, but you also have the supply. This seems to work. So I think companies are now. That's why also you see a lot of companies specializing in that. So you need to invest a lot of time to really understand the ecosystem and the process and the supply chain to be able to be competitive in the space.
One thing that I found quite interesting is both actually ADCs and therapeutics is that you have big pharmas already like quite leading the way versus some other indication or some where, let's say, cell therapy, I mean, it was the exception of Novartis, was more like biotechs.
Yeah.
Going into taking more of the risk, taking also some of the setbacks.
Yeah.
And then big pharma coming in later on versus, I feel like with the therapeutics and ADCs, I feel like big pharma are a bit more.
Probably because it's true. I guess it's true. Probably because we are at a different phase as well. In the sense that I don't know, when I started in biotech 20 years ago, we already were talking about ADCs. We already were talking about radiopharmaceuticals. But I think we just learn, and I think the generations of products became better. And also, I think why it fits with big pharma is because they have this threshold under which, in terms of revenues, under which is not interesting. And I think with ADCs and with some radiopharmaceuticals, it can go above that. More challenging for cell therapy, at least, especially if it's autologous. I think it's really a challenge. So I think there's a question just of scale as well. The big pharma is still looking for the blockbuster model, at least to some extent.
Yeah, I remember. What was it? 5-10 years ago. I mean, we have one thing about rare disease. I remember like everyone was talking about the end of the blockbuster model and this, and now
I probably was saying that at some point.
I did this 5-10 years ago, and now it's like Humira still whatever, and like
Keytruda is what, MK 30 billion or something, 29,
25 or something like.
But maybe I don't know. Yeah, it's still.
I feel like it almost did the opposite of the blockbuster, like
for the few of them. And then the question is whether the rest of the portfolio can be, because of that super blockbuster driver. Maybe the rest of the portfolio can be a little bit less blockbuster. I don't know. I would hope, because I really think some modalities and some diseases are not compatible with that, and we're struggling with some of our companies where you don't find an exit. And honestly, they're treating patients, but just you struggle to find an exit.
Yeah,
especially with big pharma.
Can you tell a bit more about this?
I mean, anything that is under 500 million now, used to be 400 or something, but anything under 500, and some would even say 700. You don't find a big pharma exit, and so you can get now into the mid-size pharma. We're looking into that. It's one option, but they're mostly European and not a lot in the US and so on. So I think it's for a large portion of biotech, actually, because in a way you have this exit pressure, and then the biotech have the opposite pressure, because they need to develop something that is affordable or compatible with whatever they can raise. And the issue is it's never going to be thousands and thousands of patients and so on. So they do a phase 1 or phase 2 on a disease that is manageable. Very often then it's a rare disease or small population, and that's often not in line with what the big pharma has. So I think you have a little bit of disconnect. Not saying that you can start with a small disease and expand, but still you have somehow a little bit of disconnect.
And how did this disconnect evolve? Do you feel it's stronger now than it was?
Yes, I mean, but it's very recent, right? It's post-COVID, and with the especially in Europe now, we see about the US because it's a little bit of a mess right now. But lack of investment or slow investment, or I think I think 2020, everyone was financed and it was too much. Now I keep talking about this filter of biotech where it's actually normal that some companies fail. I think it's the healthy and unhealthy biotech ecosystem would see some biotech, and the majority of them actually failing. But in 2020, everyone was financed, no one was failing. Now it's a little bit on the opposite. We are overcompensating, and there's a lot of companies are failing. And I just think we should be a little bit in between. So yes, indeed, right now, in the context where you lack funding, then people are going to really try. I have a lot of companies I'm working with saying, Joris, let me help me design or redesign my clinical trial because I wanted to raise 20 million, which I know is what I need to really develop the evidence I need on that disease and for that pivotal trial, whatever. I raised 10, half of it. How could we redesign the trial so that I can still generate some evidence that can still move forward my asset?
I heard, I think it's, I mean, there's two things that comes to my mind. One is that biotech is always cycles, whatever, 7-8 years cycle. And it seems like, we're quite tell me when it's going to change, because if I hope we are at the bottom of the cycle, and I think will take a bit longer. I don't know how long more, but I mean, let's see. And the second thing that if the mind is I listened to Bruce from Atlas. I was talking, I think, last week, and he was saying that like especially for later stage companies, which I guess you're kind of referring to, like some people who needs like bigger access to capital, or who needs IPO, or who needs a big deal. That's where it's like there's definitely less financing going versus very early stage. You can see like still massive funding rounds, and VCs manage to close funds. I mean, it's not that easy, but still they had closed some bigger funds also during COVID. So I guess that's
anything post phase 3 in a reasonably large indication. Europe, you're still struggling. I think Abivax is one of the French example. I think we're actually saying it openly, saying we had to go to the US to finance the phase 3.
Was what they raised. It's also impossible in Europe, I would say.
For now, yeah.
I've seen even what could surprise me also on this is like Adaptimmune recently, who got basically market approval, and they're still like really struggling. And I mean, cell therapy is tough, and Autolus the same, like got market approval. I mean, 5 years ago, this would be celebrated like crazy. Like you do cell therapy in a high unmet medical need with great results, and you got to market, approved in the US. I think a lot of pharma would be interested. It's like, well,
but again, if you're not in that threshold, then indeed it's difficult. It's several companies I'm thinking about that are positive phase 3 in Europe, still looking for a licensing partner. Like a few years ago, it had not been the case.
Well, so I think we touched a bit on it, but on the financial trends, I'm curious also because I mean you said you are working on the narrative with your clients, but you're also working on M&A and deal making and licensing. So is there anything else you have seen except what you said? Like,
so 90% of my clients came to me, I mean, since the last 2 years, asking for supporting capital raise. So which we typically don't do, or we make exceptions. But normally we do licensing and M&A. So so capital raise was the number one question. Is like, can you help us? And I say, I can help, but I will not be driving your capital raise. But I think that's a major driver. And then it's probably polarized, like the world nowadays. Like you have the very, very good cases where they don't need anyone. It's like, everyone know them. The company is very well known, very well connected. The equity story is clear. They have the good data, and they're probably raising more money than they wanted, and so they really have access to a lot of the. But you're talking capital also for the top 20 years, 5% maybe, or and then you have the rest struggling. And it's true that we've done a lot of work with those companies struggling to refine your equity story to even at preclinical stage, think about the market access elements, the pricing elements, not because you need to know everything, but you need to be able to depict the end game well enough so that whoever is going to invest in your company know that when they need to exit, they also have a strong case. So because at the beginning it was CEO of companies telling me, but Joris, I'm not going to be the one selling that drug on the market. Say, I get it, But your VCs entering now need to convince a pharma maybe in 3 years that will be the one commercializing it. So I think the level of quality of the dossier have really raised over the last years. And I think that's also helping, because I think now we are really seeing good dossiers.
Okay.
Unfortunately, not all of them get financed.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. One thing on the finance I heard recently from someone at EY was saying, okay, 3 years ago I was working on IPOs, now I'm working on liquidations.
Yeah.
It's like,
But yeah,
some truth.
yeah, it's true, and I think also it's very humbling, because it's sometimes it's ego-driven thought that you're helping companies, and then because you're helping them, they're going to be successful and so on. No, you have a lot of elements in the ecosystem that make or break a company. Again, the normal thing is that some of those companies fail also, because I've been also with some companies where there's zombies, and the lead asset fails in one indication, and we need to find another indication. Is that, I understand, if there is a strong rational and medical value to find another indication, let's do that. But maybe not, and maybe it's the end of the company. I think what we don't have in Europe yet is a healthy ecosystem, or healthy enough so that when you have a failure, those employees can go to another company and so on, which used to be the case in the US. They're like, the US were saying, we're taking risk and so on. Yeah, you're taking limited risk because you're failing a company, but the VC so well that they're going to put you in another company the next day. So I think in how much
to failure as well in the US.
Yeah. Well, because also the ecosystem is stronger. So in a way, you're not really taking such a risk. Yes, the company is, but then on a personal standpoint, those employees and skills and so on go to another project right after. Where in Europe, it's less fluid at the moment.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, natural filter. What also one thing I heard from Christoph saying, innovation is tough. Like it's and I think it is hard. Like biotech is hard.
Innovation is tough. I think we here at Alira, we also had this thing saying it's probably going to be difficult to really advise on innovation without burning yourself with it. And so we burned ourselves with innovation. We're going to come to that, but I think for me it was a very important point whenever I saw Alira and I decided to join, because I wanted a company that, again, not only advised from very far away on innovation, or you guys should do that, whatever, very comfortably in your model that is, has centuries. No, but also, facing yourself with innovation and stuff.
Yeah, that's we can talk just after about that. It would be a good transition. One thing just before also is more from a geographical point of view. Two topics. One is a more like transatlantic presence and the importance of it. I think you are like very clear that both Alira, you have a presence in Boston, a big presence, but also for your company that you're advising them to be present and to get the best of both worlds. Like how accurate is
how it's always, of course, you always start with a personal history, right? It's always because I did that. I started my career in the US, and then we're in the UK, and then across Europe and so on. I think for me has always been a strong element in my profile. Like it was this transatlantic culture in a way, able to work on both sides of the Atlantic and so on. And then I experienced it when I was in pharma, where I was charged of acquiring also companies in the US and so on. So I was always strong. But today at Alira it's also our history is that we officially headquartered in Boston, but we started in Europe, and now our employees are on both sides. Our companies, our clients are also on both sides. So we see the power of that. And so when you use, I think, a local network to start with, because I think, whenever you start, you have people around you, an ecosystem around you, it's very important to use that. But then right away to think about potentially, and I say transatlantic, but maybe I'm limiting myself, because now you can say, what about China and so on. So I think it's almost whatever link you're creating, I think is always low positive and small with positive.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Makes me, it's good. And I was about to mention China as well, but I think a lot of people talk about it.
So I don't know China personally. I can only hear people, coming back from China. And again, that person I talked to recently, it's a very biotech nerds, because I started in bioprocessing, so we were talking about bioprocessing and so on. And she was telling me, honestly, Joris, the where they are in China, and it's just amazing. Like, I don't know, you have rooms of 30 bioreactors, lined with artificial intelligence robots that just take the samples and so on, everything automated, where you can test all the conditions, and saying that, yeah, we and also the US are very far away, it seems, on a pure technological standpoint. So let's see how that develops, but it seems that whatever is happening in China is pretty powerful.
Should look into it. It's actually, I'm looking at it, and my wife is Chinese, so I'm kind of looking at it from the personal angle, and the professional angle. But it's really hard to, it's quite hard to access, but or hard to really know what's going on. But it's very interesting to see. I mean, I think even for the audience, one number that struck me with China was that I think was 2023. There was as much financing in China than more actually, just a bit more in China alone than Europe together.
Okay.
In biotech. So it's not like coming.
It like already in the scale is, yeah.
I mean, you could argue that 3 times more population, but it's still, the scale is there. And now the financing dropped a bit. It's sure they've still a bit of cycles as well, but it is. Yeah, it is there. But it's good. And I think, I mean, that's one thing also on the Transatlantic, is one thing that was repeated over and over in the show, was almost from day one, you need to have almost a presence in Boston, or very rapidly, or Boston is the US, and especially to access the financial markets. And especially what's pretty interesting is now, I think, at least in the last 5 years, was quite a lot of US VCs investing earlier on in Europe, and really pushing to make the companies more present, which I found. And Otello from Omega was on the show, and he was saying that very clearly. And I think it's a very good, a healthy development as well for the European ecosystem. Like,
it's also, you never know what element you're going to be using on. Again, I'm taking US, Europe. It could be again China. It could be, but when you develop a company, and again we're going to come to that, but we grew 10 times in 5 years. At the beginning, we didn't know where the growth would be going and so on. So in terms of business, it was pretty 50-50, but in terms of employees, talents, like Barcelona exploded. It was a way for us to recruit like we would have never been able to do in the US. So I think you never know really at the beginning of a story what elements are you going to be using depending on. So it's really a mix of culture that gives you just more tools.
Yeah, I guess the openness to both gives you more options.
Exactly.
Definitely. Yeah. That's a good one. And I guess we can transition more to Alira. First, I think one thing maybe for the audience as well is what you are actually doing, because I think you're doing quite a lot of things. And obviously I know quite well, but I can try to describe it, but I can try, but one thing that I like is that you try to be the partner for biotech on multiple like needs that they have, and along the path, which I found very interesting. And at least from the outside, seems like there's a lot of synergies between difference from what you just mentioned. Financing on one hand impacts the design of a clinical trial, impacts which CRO you choose, and you can kind of fill in and fit in there. So but maybe in your words.
So first of all, yes, it makes sense that from the outside sometimes, it's first of all because we've evolved a lot, and because we are doing multiple things. But in a way, maybe a way to tell the story is actually telling the story of how this happened, because in a way it's very, very simple. So it started in Germany 15 years ago under the rain or whatever. We did for the two co-founders were in a consulting firm doing licensing, M&A, transaction. And that starting point to me is very important, because what transaction is in the end is putting people, connecting people, the big guys, the small guys, the VCs, and some really an ecosystem role. When you want to run a transaction, you want to be connected to everyone, which to me gave this culture of openness and connection to what even Alira is today. And then very simply, our clients started asking questions within the transaction about what's the value of my asset? How should I prioritize my two assets when it comes to transaction? So portfolio strategy. What about China, US, Europe, the markets, and so on. So strategy consulting questions in a way. So we say, okay, we're going to do strategy consulting, to be able to answer those questions and be more equipped during a transaction. And then again, naturally, the questions became more technical every day. Okay, I'm working on a gene therapy. What's going to be my pricing in 20 years? Because my VCs or the people pitching or keep asking me on that. I need to be stronger in there. Or the design of my pivotal trial, they're not too sure about the endpoints and so on. Okay, we get into those questions. And regulatory roadmap of that super innovative thing. Are we sure it's that or that impact, or is that the drug, or is that not even a drug and it's a med device? And so in a way, with those technical questions, we were a little bit overwhelmed, and we say either we answer it as a consultant, which we didn't want to do, or we saw a limitation in that. And so actually the choice was made to acquire the skills that would allow you to answer those questions technically. So this is where I think the culture of the two co-founders was to say a little bit innovative. I don't know where we're going to end up, but we're going to integrate those skills in. And so we, by acquisition, but also organically, acquired a big market access shop. So now we have 40 people working only with big pharma on market access. I can tell you that you can deploy that in a transaction and explain the pricing of the gene therapy in 15 years. That's very powerful. Same thing now, you acquire 2 CROs, one in the US and one in Europe, running clinical trials for biotech. So now when you are again in a context of the transaction and you talk about clinical endpoints with actually people doing it every day. Yeah. So that became less theoretical, much more technical and much more real life. And we became closer to what a biopharma would be doing. So now you're equipped with almost all the elements that a biopharma has: strategy or commercial view, regulatory team, market access team, the clinical team, and so. And of course, the way this model works, as multitude of cases, when we work with big pharma, it's mostly about maybe market access and it's a mono product. When we work with biotech, so I'm responsible for biotech, is really transversal. Why? Because the people you work with are transversal also themselves. He or she needs to, in the morning, raise money or talk to a licensing partner, then design a clinical trial, and then a regulatory roadmap, or the changes in regulatory and market access, the JCA, how do I do that, and so on. So that's very easy in a way. It's complex as a model, but very easy to implement because the companies you partner with have this need, and it's very, very easy. The last evolution, which maybe complexified a little bit Alira, but also we found that it was completely required, was this question of now that we have all those skills inside, we still are seeing products or program failing because of lack of patient attention or patient understanding. And it can be a multitude of cases, but sometimes the way some clinical trials were designed or are designed, really not compatible with actually the disease and the condition and the even emotional condition of the patient. Really not. And sometimes it's very, very simple. Some things that just don't match. Or the way you develop a drug, or the way you understand the disease when it's a rare disease, and so on. So that's when we wanted, or we made the decision to go into really patient data. Yeah. Working with technology, becoming a real-world evidence provider. And so now we are working with registries of patients. We're working a lot of rare disease. IQVIA would more doing. So IQVIA would be doing it more on a commercial side. But yes, IQVIA is also using our technology.
Okay, they're also using. Okay,
yeah. Okay. But indeed, when you open up this question of patient data or patient focus and real-world evidence, yes, you become more complex in a way. You expose yourself to more risk of failures, but at the same time, we also think, again, as I was saying in the beginning, we don't think we can advise on innovation if we don't innovate on our model as well. And we are convinced that in 5 years, the equity story or equity value of Alira is going to be more around that than on the rest.
And then, because from what I always try to place or not benchmark, but just place.
There is none.
Let's just place and because I mean, there's quite a lot of, let's say, boutique consulting firms specialized in one niche or another. I mean, CROs, you have a lot of CROs.
Yeah.
I guess, are you doing also more in like research, like really early stage discovery, or we are entering a bit later on?
Yeah. So we basically have two sides. The consulting, broadly defined, and it could be on regulatory, it could be on market access, it could be on strategy, and then the evidence generation.
Yeah.
The evidence generation can be clinical or can be real world evidence.
Or it can be, but not working like basically.
And so now, when you open that, you're now connected to companies developing preclinical. Preclinical, in a way, it could be either advising a company to go towards the clinic, so the clinical roadmap, which the regulatory team is going to be working on. So yeah, depending on the client and on the case, but it's true that this model now has the power of supporting, I don't want to say companies at most of the stages.
Yeah.
But as you say,
except the very, very early, I guess.
But you want to go very early, then the question of fees and the discussion of everything. But it's also where I think we've it's a cultural element. But we, again, starting with transaction, I think it still is present. Is that we are connecting a lot of people in the ecosystem. I think we are very aware of our role in the ecosystem. And even beyond projects, we are really spending a lot of time helping companies connecting and so on. Why? Because again, we know those people are going to come back to you at some point. It's a long-term thing, and the story has proven us right.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, actually, I think what's crazy that you are 600 people, and you grew. How much was it? 10
times in because of being in 5 years.
Just, I mean, congrats first.
Crazy, it's a crazy success.
And I'm curious on, you also mentioned that there is quite a lot of challenges and you had to innovate as a model. Like, can you mention some of them?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the first one, obvious, is linked to what you just said. Of course, we're super happy that the brand is more known, and that I think our role again in the ecosystem is known. We have very, very good shareholders and so on. So I think very happy of this success, but indeed, we are also a very different company from 5 years ago. Whatever was almost natural and easy when we were 50, almost in the same office or two offices. Now with 600, it's a different game. So you need to structure yourself, and organize processes and so on. So, for example, recently we made a decision that we would have a COO that would really handle all the structural functioning of the company and so on. And now we have also leaders like myself who are going to be spending more time with clients and so on. Things like that where you need at some point to reorganize yourself. So the growth is painful. And that's for sure. And that's one. The second one is probably indeed that we have no benchmarks. And because, if you take every piece that is within Alira, you have a benchmark, you have a competitor, you have a market, and so on. Like as a CRO, I can tell you that we are working exclusively with biotechs. Okay, that's very clear. I can explain and so on. But it's true that when you zoom out and do corporate-wise, it's like so not having benchmarks is very uncomfortable, because
I guess even for clients, they must also they cannot really compare directly.
That's a good question. That's a good point, because and we addressed that, I think it was 2 years ago, where we also reorganized ourselves a little bit by client type.
Yeah.
Just acknowledging that working with big pharma is very different from working with biotech, working with medtech or VCs and private equities, because we do a lot of work with VCs and private equity. So every client has his own style, way of working, needs, portfolio. So I think once you do that, it's easier to understand your client. You don't have to sell transversality to big pharma if you don't want to do that. Biotech transversality is key, so then you can push on that. So I think that was a challenge. I think we've addressed it quite okay. But still, as we grow, what's the benchmark? What's the metric on profitability? I think all of those things are difficult, and that's why you need very, very good shareholders that really understand that there is no benchmark and back you also in the tough times.
Which actually I didn't know actually, but you have, which is crazy about shareholders. You have the Strongman in holding Atos, so the same investors at Biotech, and then the Munier family, Orazeo, and then
Creative.
Creative, sorry,
Creative.
uh, and then you raised 100 million gross debt recently. So I mean, you were very good at convincing shareholders and raising money. But especially I was especially the Schumann, I was quite surprised actually, because I know them. I know the investments more in biotechs. I didn't know they were investing more in hybrid consulting CRO firm.
Yeah. So Atos, the stories of this family office, so big shareholder in Biotech and so on. Again, I mean, this story is very simple in a way. I think the story is that we were working with one of their portfolio companies. They liked the work, and actually, it's very smooth integration because Atos is invested among many other things, but in a lot of biotech. So now having an advisor that can also help those portfolio companies make sense. So I think it's a very easy integration. And it's true that for now, family offices have given us that support a little bit longer term than some other investments that allow a model like us to take the time to get to the right size. Because I think what we're seeing is that we are around 100 million in revenues those days, but indeed, I think as we grow, we're seeing the model really become stronger and stronger. And you need just patient or just understanding shareholders to be able to support you during those phases.
And historically, you were, because you never raised VC money.
No.
So it's only okay. And I guess you were quite profitable, or at least on the year on, except that with the acquisition.
Of course, being a service company, you're profitable on the consulting, the CRO, all things But when you decide to invest in technology and biological evidence, of course, that's an investment and R&D that will deliver, especially on the equity value, just takes time. So, but this is exactly where we didn't want just to stop. And especially, I think I could say we anticipated, but it's wrong. It's like we always tend to reach our engineer strategy afterwards with you would at storyteller and yeah, exactly. The reality, but with AI now, I feel much more comfortable in a company that has all those pieces and is very equipped with different tools than if I would be just a very limited consulting firm. Because what is going to be consulting in 5 years? I think, for sure something very different.
Yeah.
So I think now you are much more a company that is an hybrid between maybe a pharma company and a service company. And to me, that gives me a little bit more
Interesting.
reassurance.
In this case, also, when you talk about AI or anything, tech investment, also scale matters, and the amount of data you have matters as well. So I can imagine you're profiting from that as well, like just having scale of number of clients, scale of number of everything. Yeah.
And of course, it's never enough. I mean, you always want to brand to be known and so on, but for sure, it has changed dramatically in the last 5 years. I even want to say sometimes it's frustrating because the current ecosystem is tough. I mean, the current environment in biotech is not super easy. Pharma also is cutting costs and so on. So there is money, but it's not super, stuff.
Yeah.
And we see that almost the perception we have from the market is stronger than what it can reflect in our numbers. And frustrating, but also positive in the sense that the moment the ecosystem is a little bit better, I think that model, we can feel it every day. It really is powerful.
Yeah, that's good. And maybe switching to more your personal background before talking about how you apply medicine 3.0. Well, can you go back to, let's say, where you studied at? You mentioned you studied bioengineering or bioprocessing in Bordeaux, and then you did some strategic consulting. Can you walk a bit? I don't know.
So we did some failed medicine first. because it was very tough at 18 years old. I didn't see myself just working 24 hours a day and so on. And I was depressed and so on. And at the end of the parking lot, I see this blue bubble, because the school is actually in Bordeaux, is a big bubble, a big blue bubble. Yes, I'm going to look at it and so on. And it was bioprocessing. Didn't know anything about bioprocessing. And so I did 2 years of bachelor or something in molecular biology, where you need to be ranked at the top to be able to enter at École d'ingénieurs. Either prepare out the top results from the university. So I worked there was in the top 1 or 5%. Then I entered in the school again. It was not planned, right? And so I did this engineering school in bioprocessing, and only afterwards I realized the power of bioprocessing at that time. It was the 2000s. Monoclonal antibodies started with a little bit the fragments of antibodies, so the more complex biologics and so on. And having a degree in bioprocessing was something super new. Nobody had that. And so I used that to travel in the US and the UK in scientist jobs. Honestly, I was spending most of my time outside of the lab to understand. So I started in California, for example, and I was amazed of the relationship between VCs, academic, and the CEO of the company. They were talking every day. It was very fluid and so on, which at the time I didn't see in Europe. So interesting thing. And I knew at the beginning, from the beginning, I knew I didn't want to stay a scientist, but indeed I used that as a tool to be able to see different types of companies. And then I found this consulting firm, Bionest Partners, which I think is now acquired. But it was really the fun times of class of tech. Yeah, it's after you were not there, but actually, yeah, it was a good school. At least when the years where I was, it was a good school. I worked with big pharma, small biotechs, and so on. I became also a geek of NPV modeling, which really helped me even today as kind of translating science into finance and being at ease with the two worlds. So strategy consulting is always, I think, a good school. And then 15 years in the industry in different roles, plasma-derived industry, which is a very industry, yeah. And it's funny because when people look at my profile, they see LFB and then UCB, where I was head of licensing, and they keep saying that, they keep saying at LFB and saying, oh, yeah, it's a so-so company and it's very tough, very French and so on. Yes, but I learned a lot. I learned so much. It was doing so difficult. I'm doing pretty well. I'm a biased view because I love biotech and they focused on plasma now. Yeah. But indeed, yes, I think this mix of different platforms, plasma, recombinant. At the time, we were the number one biotech in France. And because it's still, I think, owned by the French government or the APE, it was all very quiet. You didn't have to communicate a lot, but we were making a lot of investment in biotech. Did a lot of acquisitions in the US, in Asia as well. So that's why I always also advise is take a company where you can just test things and have maybe less competition, honestly, where you go to a second class company, so then you're a bit more junior. Yeah. And so I was exposed to things that I would have never been exposed in big pharma. A lot of tension as well, because you're the big guys versus the CSL and the Grifols, and you're struggling because of size. Yeah. You don't have the money to put in a licensing deal, so you need to think about creative way to structure a deal. But at the same time, when there is a need to do an IPO in the US, they give you the key of the project, and you're like, okay, I don't know where to start. So I think it's just exposure. I think it's English. Yeah. Exposure is really something that you can.
Yeah, and I guess you had a very strong, very steep learning curve. Yeah, connected.
I was ready to work a lot, and I just loved it. So yeah, I spent a lot of time in the US, which is transatlantic role, and when you love it, you tend to be successful.
Actually, reminds me, I have some good memories, but I started really almost my career, but my first job. I don't want to say career. I mean, sounds, I don't know. No, it's okay. Career, okay. I mean, not that advanced either. So, but the first company I built, a biotech, and we did this Tour de France that I built.
Yeah, I remember that.
As a biotech.
But you see, I still read.
Yeah.
And I put the shirts, and I remember the Tour de France
On the bike, it was all.
It was a genius moment.
And we went to Les Ulysses for to interview one executive from LFV actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which was pretty cool to visit. And they have an amazing site. And
Yeah.
just next to Ipsen.
Yeah.
And it was at least from the Ipsen, I think is a R&D site or manufacturing site. But actually, yeah, it was cool to visit anyway. Just
very good people, very good knowledge in manufacturing, very, very good patient centricity also of this company, a lot of rare disease, so yeah, I think they're very good values. Yeah.
That's cool. And then how, like, I'm always curious on the what happens behind the decision that you decided to join Alira. Like, what was the decision making there?
So I was at UCB, head of licensing. I would say, a superb company, UCB, a lot of funds, super good pipeline, and so on. So, and I knew how to do my job. So maybe too much. No, but I know, of course, it's a public company, so I'll say what I can. But I was working on a big out licensing deal for one of their lead assets, and amazing process where we got offers really, really high. Would have been my biggest deal ever, really, really big one. On the high side of 3-digit upfront million, it was really high. And then UCB realized that it was better to keep it because of the so superb. So it was a lot of emotions and so on. And maybe the next one, I don't know where to come. That's the thing when you're business development, is like you also want to be in deals and so on, and companies have cycles, of course. And yes, I wanted to be. So it's to some extent, after so many years being in a chaotic environment, I needed a little bit more adrenaline. And I remembered Alira, as you say, not from what they were doing, but from a culture. So I knew Benjamin Chambon, one of the co-founders. I knew something. They were doing something different. Sometimes you just don't need more. That's what I needed to kind of meet the team and be convinced. And then I went and meet Gabriele, who is the CEO in Boston. Amazing guy, and is the guy behind the model and so on. And yeah, we kicked it.
Yeah, that's it. And why? And then you moved to Barcelona as well. Like, that was part of the.
Yeah, so that's a very, again, like, I can tell you the very fancy explanation, but I think that when you live in Belgium and you're offered to take the lead of an office wherever you want, and in the list you have Barcelona, it's kind of very. But that simple thing that for me worked, and I wanted to test a new country and so on. 2 months in, I really felt at home. So now after 7 years, I really feel this is my home. But what applied to me, and I didn't know, applied to all the talents that we have now in the team. And same thing, they came for Alira, but they came also for Barcelona. And so that allows us to grow whenever we want, super quickly. So
when you want to do that, you have quite a lot of French also in the team.
But yeah, the beginning was the French. She was in Alia, so because 2 co-founders, but then he became also Catalan. He became people from South America. He became a really super international connecting culture. So we're now 150 people in Barcelona, and it's the fastest growing office. Again, not because we planned it, just because we had different tools, different offices, different dynamics, and it was the story. So
yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing. And so now, medicine 3.0. So how do you apply it to your own lifestyle? Like, curious.
So it's both simple and boring in a way. I've reprioritized sleep, like really trying. So I'm going to sleep at 10 every night.
How much do you sleep a night?
I wake up at 6:30. So yeah. So prioritizing sleep seems easy, but socially it's kind of difficult. Because if you want to prioritize sleep, you probably also want to have your last meal 3 hours before.
It's hard in Spain.
Which is hard in Spain. So I'm totally No, but then you have a balance, which is tough because socially you're doing all the things. And so I've always been training a lot, doing a lot of weightlifting. Even I remember when I was weightlifting in Bionest, it was a long time ago. People were making fun of me because it was like badly seen to be a bodybuilder, whatever. Now every physician is telling you that it's good for everything. So I think we also evolved on that. But yeah, sleep is probably number one. Nutrition is the second one. Is exercise is the third one. So uh, but I think yes, indeed, it's a question of how does that apply to yourself, which is the easy answer, and then how can you influence also others around you? Because when you see people struggling with those things, they also know what to do, right? But it's not so easy to just decide one day. So no, the mental element is also something that is very present and limiting us, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, that's also what you just discussed. And I think going back to the first point as well, it takes quite a lot of effort and prioritization as well. Like it's not, I mean, it's simple, but it's not easy.
No.
And it's a choice as well. And
it's a balance because like what is easy for me, again, what is easy for me is actually to prioritize it. I have no issue to eat whatever I need to eat and so on. But then the downside of that is that you become, I don't want to say isolated, but you have a risk to be isolated socially, right? Because again, you don't eat outside so much. You don't, it's very easy. And the mental aspect with, is also as important as the rest. So you now need to proactively organize those.
find the social part almost the hardest.
I agree.
I cut alcohol almost totally. And that's socially,
yeah,
very difficult. Way more difficult than my own control.
Yes. I agree, 100%.
Yeah. Especially, let's say, French, German. I mean, we like
Yeah.
alcohol, we don't know.
Yeah, we are in a society where alcohol will cut you from a lot of those, very, very good moments. Even nutrition as well. You could be, and sleep as well. So I think all the things that we should be prioritizing are probably the ones that are going to put us in a difficult situation socially.
That's good. I actually have a personal story, but I mean, I also prioritize things a lot. Like I call it life optimization, and I went pretty deep into it also on the meditation side. But recently, I have some more like mental health challenges, and actually, I see also how some things which are managed and some things are out of control, like sleep, some insomnia. It's crazy difficult to fix actually, and sometimes it's not even like it's kind of that's what's in your control, and then there's beyond control. And that's really like tough. And even, it's so and then now, I mean, I don't know in your case, but in my case, I start to really understand also that first it's not easy.
Yeah.
And for some people, in some cases, it's even harder. It's even beyond control.
Yes.
Which before I didn't really have.
Step by step, you need to go after that thing, and then it's cycles as well. I think I'm actually listening to a podcast on insomnia, and I'll give you the link. At least interesting one, because now you have some techniques to try and go after it depending on the source. But yeah, I think it's also accepting that you're never gonna be perfect, and again, you're gonna have, depending on what happens in your life, you're gonna go through those things, and then you can get into even the trauma analysis of whatever happened to you really before. So all of that plays. But I think what I like about healthcare today is not a taboo anymore. Meaning all those elements are on the table, known to play a role. We don't know exactly how. It's very complex and so on. Where I feel maybe 20 years ago, it was not at all even a topic you could talk about.
Yeah, you can be more open. I like that. I'm curious also maybe on you. How do you measure it? Because you just say we're not really sure. Like, how do you measure it, like for yourself?
So I've measured things and over measured days. So no, but I'll take a very simple example. I wore a glucose monitoring system for a while. Helped me to understand the way I was reacting to some foods, the way a stressful meeting would give me a spike in glucose, which I had no idea about. But then it was stressing me out. So as you say, I developed also certain things I didn't like, I didn't want to eat anymore outside. I didn't want. So I think it's a good thing to measure and then to remove. So I'm not pro super measuring, because I think that also leads to something. So it's a balance. I think you need to really have all the elements on the table and think, okay, I'm going to play on one. It's going to help me, give me some data, but destabilize the rest. So
I like that. Yeah. I think the focus on one pillar at a time, because they're all interconnected and one pillar is good. And then measuring, I went also really down the rabbit hole of measuring. Some things I still measure, but I like the measuring on, again, connected to a pillar, connected to a decision to make, or some really monitoring with action connected to it.
Yeah.
Say, you want to lose weight, for example, you want to reach certain thing, you can measure glucose monitor. And I've actually never done it, but I heard it's very good. And you can learn some pattern and develop some habits, but you have actions connected to it versus measuring to measure.
Yeah. Meditation there, because then all the meditation and related kind of practices and it helps him grateful, and all those kind of things really play a role. I mean, and again, it's difficult to say, I think even worse as a scientist. Like, if I really start the day with like grateful energy and kindness and love and so on, it really is that going to change something? Because I feel it does, but and I guess now we're starting to think or to see some evidence, scientifically proven, that indeed there's some energetic elements that probably helps you. But again, as a scientist, I think it's attention as well.
100% agree. Yeah. The last part, before we do a more quick questions, one thing I could like about you as well is you've got a relaxed look, and also you feel quite relaxed.
Yeah.
How do you you cultivate it, or is it like more natural? Especially in biotech, biopharma, where people are a bit more serious.
Yeah, biotech is less serious than banker or something. Yeah, so no, I don't know. You always have your own stress and so on, but
So you don't look stressed right now.
yeah, no, I'm not. But again, and I think it's the same tools or ingredients that I've talked about before.
Yeah.
It's true that, again, for me very personally, I need to start my day with a certain routine that probably anchors me and gives me so it's meditation, it's training physical expression. I think moving is something where I find very helpful. And then it's the posture. I'm a very big, so, and then we can get into the shoes I wear, and so like barefoot shoes and so on. But no, but I discovered my feet at 40 years old, because I had flat feet, and then I started to actually play with my feet, and that gave me a posture that now helps me. Even like now, if you're seated on your butt instead of you sitting on your lumbers, to me, it's going to give you a different energy as well. So yeah, we can do another podcast on this one.
Like an episode. Yeah. Okay, let's do a quick fire and some more biotech topics. So just quick questions. You can answer one sentence or a quick answer. Who is one of your biotech heroes?
I think biotech is the perfect example of anti-heroes, because I actually think that to innovate, if you think you're right, I don't think you're going to be successful. So,
What's on top of your mind at the moment?
The brand of Alira is something that
You gave one, but maybe a second advice to especially young life science professionals who want to build a career.
It's going to sound super simple or repeated and so on, but indeed, just something you like. I think if you're motivated by something you like that gives you emotion, I think it's just easier.
Yeah, passion, something you like, a passion. Yeah. What's one of your favorite biotech or science books?
I was saying that the Medicine 3.0 is, I don't think it's it's something that,
It's a good one. Actually, I think I have it at home. My wife wrote it.
You haven't read it?
I haven't yet, but actually you answered this one. One mistake you made in the past 12 months?
Trying to be too pushy on some of the closing of a project is something where when you have to deliver on, quarterly or monthly or whatever for everyone, I think is something that, and again, going back to the posture where things are going to come when it's right, but it's difficult to apply every day.
Can you imagine? Let's finish on a more personal. What's your favorite hobby?
So I would say weightlifting is still one of my best, and then the more recent one is mountain biking, downhill biking.
Nice. And I guess the mountains help.
Mountain in Barcelona are very good stuff.
Amazing. Thanks. It's a good way to finish. Yeah. Thanks for the conversation.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for coming. It was super fun.
I'm impressed by the clarity of Joris about the big picture. I'm also impressed by his approach to a healthy lifestyle and his more chilled manners. If you have also enjoyed this episode, please hit the like, follow, review button. Any of these actions would help us a lot to give more exposure to the show to more people. If you want to go even further, you can make a donation via the PayPal link in the description below. If you want to see similar videos, we have a lot of them on the channel, so please feel free to check them out. Also, I would be curious to hear what you think. So if you could drop a comment wherever you are, or shoot me an email at Philip@Flot.bio. All right, thanks for staying to the end, and catch you in the next episode.